What is up, Guardians? In honor of it being in the 20s in Florida right now, I'm going to go ahead and bring you my three favorite Stasis subclass builds, one for each class. In all honesty, Stasis is probably my favorite subclass. Thematically, I mean, Prismatic aside, right? Prismatic is super cool. But of the main five subclasses, I think Stasis has been my favorite since it came out because it was the first 3.0 and it really set the tone for what a subclass could do in Destiny when things like Void, Arc, and Solar didn't have anything else going for them. Stasis came out swinging with Freeze being absolutely disgusting. In current sandbox, slow, not that great. Freeze is nice as a CC. Doesn't do a ton of damage though. Shatter has been buffed a couple times. It does do fairly decent damage, especially if you can get like a group of enemies frozen together. If you shatter them all at once, each enemy will take however many instances of shattered damage for each enemy nearby, right? If there's 5 enemies near each other, you're going to do 5 times the shatter damage than if you had one frozen enemy and shatter that one enemy and hit just him. Even though it is not, the pinnacle of DPS and total damage per second, the ability of it to provide both CC and decent damage is good, right? I mean, for that purpose, I really wanted to go ahead and do some Stasis builds. Like I said, love Stasis. It's that time of year. So I hope you enjoyed some of these builds. We're going to start with Hunter today. And this is a Mask of Bacchus build. I was thinking about how to play Stasis aggressively. And Mask of Fealty has some pretty aggressive options. Renewal, more of a defensive tool. You can play it a bit aggressively by throwing it at enemies, running into it, and then doing some kind of shotgun, glaive, melee build setup as an option. But I wanted to play with Mask of Bacchus because it is getting some use for things like Lord of Wolves. But with the newly buffed Shatter Dive, I wanted to see if maybe there's a way to do Mask of Bacchus for some teleportation, a weapon focus, kind of doing double special, and using Shatter Dive to set off really big detonations and instantly max out your Frost Armor stacks. Now, do remember, Stasis Shatter does fairly decent damage, right? Let's just say if a grenade normally does 1,000 damage, Shatter probably does like 400 right now. With Shatter Dive, if you shatter an enemy with the Shatter Dive AoE, you will do more damage. I don't think it's like 50%, but it might be something like closer to 30% more damage for a Shatter Dive hit. I'm pairing that with Grim Harvest. These both do double dip into Frost Armor, which might be a little bit of an overcommitment to some people. However, I think making Stasis Shards is very, very underrated. For the purposes of, one, giving you melee energy, I'm only running 6 melee energy. If you do have higher, this will get you a lot more. You can obviously commit to more melee if you so choose, but just having that for some melee cooldown is nice. But for the most part, picking up just the one shard for Frost Armor gives us an easy way to consistently maintain the Frost Armor after I've maxed it out with Shatter Dive. Normally, Hunter has the hardest time maintaining Frost Armor stacks because Grim Harvest relies on kills to proc, whereas Warlocks and Titans can max out and maintain their Frost Armor just in neutral. All they have to do is freeze and shatter enemies. So, Shatter Dive giving us some sort of neutral game benefit to Frost Armor and our survivability just seemed really strong. So to build into that, I wanted to go for some setup that really let me build into grenade regen and freezing enemies so I can shatter them, while also maintaining my class ability cooldown for Bacchus and having some high weapon stat for more ammo. I'm taking Glacier Grenade here. This is really just a thematic pick. Running Glacier Grenade and Shatter Dive feels nostalgic. Shatter Dive does increase the damage of shattering the crystals, so it does do a bit more damage than a normal Glacier Grenade does, and it's more reactive than Duskfield, and a bit more generous than Cold Snap in emergency situations, as well as having the flexibility to use it for a jump puzzle or use it to create cover to heal, as I'm not going for a high health stat. I'm not healing much off of orbs, right? So having the ability to create some breathing room is nice utility, and it's not a longer cooldown than like Cold Snap. My next pick would probably be Duskfields, or if you're going to switch off Grim Harvest, then take Touch of Winter. You can really mix and match the Touch of Winter grenades on Hunter. For melee, Half-Take Withering Blades are our only option. Fortunately, pretty good option, decent damage, and it does apply a good chunk of slow. Not enough to freeze a target on one hit, but if you have two of these stacked up, you can instantly freeze an enemy with that. I have Marksman's Dodge on. Because this is a Mask of Bacchus build, I'm going to be shooting a lot. A lot of my weapons are going to have low magazines, but they're going to kill enemies pretty fast, so I want to have Marksman Dodge to go ahead and reproc all my weapons reloads at once, and it will pick up any nearby ammo bricks and then orbs with our mods as well to keep us in the fight without having to go around and scrounge. Similarly, that's why we have Whisper of Conduction on here to have our stasis shards tracked to us. Keeps us moving, which means we're less likely to get bogged down and killed. We have Whisper of Rime to increase your maximum stack count and duration of frost armor. I believe with Rime we get up to 8 stacks, which is about a 50% damage resist for, I think it's 13 seconds compared to like a 32% decrease in damage for 8 seconds. This is a sizable increase to both stack and duration. Shards is here just because I'm running Glacier Grenade. This gives me a way to cycle it back into itself. Decreases the cooldown basically by half if you get the shatter correctly. If you leave a crystal over, like you just shatter 3 or 4 of them, leave 1 crystal left over, you can get this back up in like roughly 20 seconds. But for the most use cases, it's just here to make sure this is having a lower cooldown than it does at base. You can go ahead and switch this out with something like Refraction if you need more dodge energy, or Rending if you want to use primary ammo to shatter enemies. That is a totally fine option. Obviously, if you're taking off Glacier Grenade and you're not running Headstone, I would switch off Shards. Torment is here as my mainstay grenade regen. Since Shatter is a little bit on the fence, if I'm going to get Shards to proc on the Glacier Grenade, backup is just have Torment. It does really, really impact your grenade cooldown, especially when you have Frost Armor, so it's giving you about double the returns on your grenade per damage taken. On average, I want to say between Shards and Torment, it's probably close to 10 to 15 seconds when you get a grenade, which is very, very fast considering we're not really building around the grenade much else in the kit. Finally, I do have Fissures on here. This is kind of just because since I'm trying to go for Shatters so much, I want to maximize the amount of damage Shatter is doing per instance in this build. Is Fissures the end-all be-all for every build? No. Base Shatter damage is much higher than Fissures boosts it. I think put together, Fissures is an increase of like 6% damage of all Shatter damage. All things considered, is that going to make or break most of your kills? No. However, in the long term, 6% is still 6%, so I have it on here. I do like just thematically having it. You can, if you so choose, switch this out. And my next recommendation would probably be something like Fractures, which will help you maintain Frost Armor if you are meleeing the enemy. Maybe Impetus if you want to make sure you're reloading your weapons just for some more time. Or if you need more orbs, take Bonds because you will be killing a lot of frozen enemies. And getting an orb from that is great, even on a 10-second cooldown. As for the weapons are probably the least thought out part of these builds, just as a forward. I do have Conditional Finality on here. Because the first shot instantly freezes, you can, in dire needs, shoot an enemy that will survive the first shot, then instantly Shatter Dive to max out your damage resist, or to maintain your Frost Armor stacks, even if you are about to drop them. But even from neutral, that'll be max in one shot. In addition, the Ignition is obviously like very, very strong. Conditional Finality has never been a slouch in PvE, so it's a really great pick for stasis builds, especially when you just need to freeze something on command. Alternatively, if you want to go into the freeze, but you don't want to use conditional, you want a legendary, things like Trachnius, as well as Critical Anomaly, or any other chill clip weapon is going to be very great here for giving you that utility. You're going to have to be able to survive 2 shots, right? But if you're going for double body shot on a sniper, more enemies might survive that than may survive Conditional Finality. So maybe this is more reliable, but Conditional is faster, more fun, but you do have plenty of legendary options for freezing a target in neutral to get you your Shatter Dive proc. I am planning to use this in most content with something like Forbearance, because Forbearance will be my ad clear. With the 30% bonus damage from Mask of Bacchus, this actually will chunk through some pretty tanky targets with Chain Reaction obviously giving you better AoE, helping you chain your Mask of Bacchus dodges more consistently. In the content that I was in, I put on a Uncivil Discourse so I could have anti-barrier. You might want to customize this just to what you're doing. All things considered, maybe I would have actually put on a kinetic sniper here for the anti-barrier and kept forbearance, but I didn't think about it in the moment. So double special works really well here with our high weapon stack, giving us the double ammo bricks. I've been running and testing double special with high weapon stats for a while, and I've coming around to enjoying that. Obviously, if you want to make this a primary, go ahead. If you want this to be a legendary, just to be an exotic primary, this is very flexible. The build's not super reliant on any specific weapons to work. I do recommend having a good burst damage heavy, however. Because Stasis doesn't specialize in burst damage, and our super is more of a crowd control than DPS super, we'll tack on some good extra damage in the boss phase, but it's not going to instantly burn a champion when you need to. Chill Inhibitor, great pick. Anything with bait and switch is going to be a very, very powerful choice. So that, heavy sniper, a good rocket. Crossbows are a hard maybe. They don't have the DPS that I want them to have, but they are better than machine guns by far. The infinite ammo is also a bonus. Obviously, Mask of Bacchus is our exotic of choice here. This will let you turn your dodge into a teleport, which is faster and goes further. And then as long as you have the buff that it gives you, which will last about 10 to 12 seconds, you will get a buff to your Stasis and Arc weapons and the Lord of Wolves that will increase their damage by, I believe it's 10, 20, or 30% as you stack it up. Or maybe it might be 11, 22, 33. I didn't double check that before I did this, but it's about 30% at max. While you have that buff up, getting kills will give you class ability back. And at about this 66 where I am, it should be about 2 kills to max out your dodge again to go ahead and chain that, which is why something like Forbearance is great. It is very good at picking up 2 kills, so you can proc it again. The faster you do that, the faster you will charge this up to those 3 stacks, and then it's just a matter of maintaining the dodge cooldown over that 10 seconds. For the rest of this armor, there's not a ton here that you actually need. I prefer to have a scavenger on to make sure I am maintaining my ammo reserves. I find it's hard to know for sure what affects conditional finality. So I've just opted to commit to my other weapons to give them some extra ammo gen and the reserves, and conditional finality can kind of pick up the slack just in use case, because it's a bit weird with mods since it is solar and Stasis at times. I don't want to accidentally leave it on solar and not get the benefits of the mod that I'm running for it. So I've got a scavenger on here for my regular special, my Forbearance, my hand cannon, then a arc siphon for whatever I'm going to be killing ads with. I have double ammo finders on here, one for each element, because I'm going to be trying to switch between them. If you're going to focus on special, go ahead and take double special here. If you want to focus on your heavy for ad clear, go ahead and take double heavy. You'll be fine pretty much either way as long as you're killing things consistently with a low enough commitment of ammo. Finally, I do recommend having double resist on here. Melee resist is pretty useful because you're going into Shatter Dive. You're going to be in range of Shatter Dive. That's going to give you the melee damage resist. So this will stack 15% and 15% with concussive dampener. And then I have class font on just to make sure if I drop the buff that I have a decent cooldown on my dodge. Time dilation to extend my surge. And then better already for Ferropotent, which is generally recommended. The artifact is not a major concern of mine. I don't really test my builds with or without the artifact. If there are things in here that you think help with your artifact, definitely go ahead and take them. Sniper's Meditation is a great pick if you're using snipers. Kinetic Rupture is a great pick. There is a class agnostic Elemental Siphon down here. Just generally take what's going to be enjoyable to you. I don't really care about the artifact. So this is the Hunter build. Stats are a bit up in the air. I recommend high weapon, high super, decent grenade, decent melee if you can get it, and then around 70 class abilities is what you're shooting for. For our Warlocks, I actually have been playing and enjoying Shadebinder ever since it came out. I mean, before we even had like Stasis Exotics, I was a fan of the Bleak Watcher, Eye of Another World build. Great times on Glassway all the way back in Beyond Light, and it's still a good build there. However, Bleak Watcher is not my favorite aspect. If you watch my aspect video, I talked about it. Generally, I find it is passive. It doesn't always target the thing that you want it to target. It's great. Yeah, it's good ad clear and ad control. But I much prefer Ice Flare bolts for my builds because I get to generally multiply the usefulness of The melee, cold snaps, I can have Winter's Wrath feedback into itself on a champion if they're like alone in a room. You won't see that very often in some of the gameplay that I have, but if there's an enemy close to a wall, usually champions, and there's not an enemy for the bolts to target, they will retarget the enemy you just shattered. So you can definitely 1v1 a barrier champion with just Ice Flare bolts, which is funny. But Ice Flare bolts lets you have ad clear, maintain crowd control on minimal cooldowns. It works with your weapons. If you're using a weapon that freezes, this will proc off of that weapon. So I just find it's a very fun, very useful aspect, very, very powerful for giving you that extra shatter damage very consistently. Pair that with Glacial Harvest, which is one of my favorite aspects on Stasis. This is probably the best harvest, in my opinion. It does compete with Tectonic. Tectonic's pretty good now. But originally, this was easily the best because it procs when you freeze a target. And freezing an enemy is pretty easy. We have Ice Flare bolts. We've got Cold Snaps. The melee freezes. Chill Clip freezes. Plenty of exotics freeze. Winter's Wrath freezes, right? All of those things will proc Glacial Harvest. Depending on the tier of the enemy, you will get more and more shards, up to 3 at mini-bosses and bosses, which will then give you Frost Armor when you pick them up, and, a little bit of healing, but the healing is negligible for most of these. This is just a very consistent way to get those, give you melee energy back, and if you build into it, there is a great way to kind of make use of those with Elemental Charge to fuel your Charge with Light builds. I find we generally have enough orbs, but if you are struggling for orbs on a Stasis build, highly recommend trying Elemental Charge. On the high end, it will be about 2 to 3 shards to get 1 charge, which, all things considered, is not too many. Now, I am taking Cold Snaps here because it is an on-demand instant freeze grenade as long as they are touching the ground, which is the case for also Glacier and Cold Snap. Duskfield can work in the air, but you have to actually hit them with it. Unfortunately, no real good Stasis grenade for airborne enemies, and the gameplay I have has a lot of flying enemies. Besides the point, most of the time, Cold Snap is reactive, and it's pretty good at what it does. Will chain freeze 3 enemies, and works with our exotic. Penumbral Blasts are only melee, but with Ice Flare bolts, it becomes a really good ad clear tool because you can go ahead and instantly freeze 1 target. If you shatter them, if they die or not, they will send out an Ice Flare bolt, which can then hit an extra enemy or 2 and chain further from there. This can chain up to 7 times with Ice Flare bolts, so you can get at least 8 enemies frozen off of 1 cooldown, and sometimes the AoE will freeze more than 1 at once. I took a Healing Rift because Stasis doesn't really have a lot of sustain, but Healing Rift will handle that very, very well. Empowered Rift is fine if that's what you so choose and you have enough healing in some other way. For the fragments, Refraction's actually the one here that I would say if you want to, go ahead and switch it. I have it on here to give you some more class ability so that you can pop more Healing Rifts. You're going to be killing a lot of enemies who are frozen, but if you generally find that you don't need that, go ahead and take something like Bonds. Because I find Stasis is very bad at proccing firepower or heavy-handed, not firepower, heavy-handed or whatever the grenade generator is. Oh, it is firepower. So it doesn't proc these very well because freeze does not always count as the source that you think it does. The game just doesn't see it as that, or the shatter becomes a different instance, or you kill an enemy with a shot immediately after they shatter. For tons of reasons, it's unreliable. Bonds gives you a reliable generator for at least 1 orb every 10 seconds. If you've got time dilation to be 15 seconds, then this becomes, self-sustaining, which is perfectly fine. And that's all you need. If you're going to take anything else other than Refraction and Bonds, I would consider maybe taking something like Fissures, or if you have Headstone, maybe a Shards. Conduction is here again to go ahead and safely make sure you are getting your Frost Armor stacks. Rhyme here to make sure you're going higher. Great survivability, double dip there. And then Torment is here. Because this makes no Stasis Crystals innately, I've opted to take Torment here to ensure you're getting your grenade cooldown back if something happens. You're going to be running this one specifically just to make sure you are good. Weapons, again, not really looking at a well thought out and maintained build here. I have Finality's Augur on for funsies because it generates some decent super. This is a roaming super for Winter's Wrath, and it has been buffed, so it does do decently well. You'll see in some of the gameplay, it does like 2-shot the champions in Master Lost sectors, which is pretty good, all things considered. way better than it used to be. So I think genning that is just good ethic. Make sure you are getting your super pretty often. I have a high super stat because that's the armor I kind of had on, and I didn't want to change it around too much because going over 100 in grenade and melee does not really do much on stasis. This is just more optimal, it felt like. So, super generation, decent damage over time, just a fun exotic to use. Primary here for stunning overloads. I have just a jolting feedback SMG, and then Conspiracy Honed as our sniper. Obviously, this has no synergy with the subclass itself. However, with such high burst damage, you are making up for the one thing that this build is lacking, which is some kind of boss damage burst. Winter's Wrath is not going to kill bosses very quickly. None of your stasis, freeze, and shatter is going to phase champions and bosses without really huge amounts of ads surrounding them. So something like a Conspiracy Honed here with a double damage perks and being a blaster is a godsend and exactly what you're looking for. This is your burst damage for champions. Finalities becomes your total damage for your boss, and when you pair them together, you just have very good damage. Your class then becomes secondary to that weapon rotation. So this is just generally there to maintain your time to kill on all the ads, all the elites, and have all the champions stunned or frozen for you to then kill them with weapons. Obviously, Glacier Grenade build, you're going to take Osmomancy Gloves. These are one of my favorite exotics in the entire game. They are very, very consistent at what they do, being your Cold Snap grenades on hit will generate charge. So if you direct impact an enemy, you'll get a chunk of energy. And then for every enemy the Seekers hit, you will get another instance of grenade energy. It does scale with the difficulty of the enemy. So a champion, if you direct impact them and then freeze them with the Seeker, will give you a full grenade charge back, especially at 100 super. 100 grenade. So that is a really reliable and consistent way to apply freeze to groups of enemies, right? Because even if you're just getting the whole grenade back on the one champion, there are still 2 more chains of that freeze cold snap left. In ad clear situations, it does hit multiple ads sometimes with a grenade, and that will give you additional energy as well. But just know the weaker the enemies are, the less this chains into itself reliably. Since there's no real consistent way to gen orbs with this, I've just opted to take double font here to get both of our melee and grenade to at least 100 to maximize their cooldowns, and then taking a little bit on all of these to get my class ability up to a decent cooldown just to make sure my abilities are all coming up roughly at the same pace. So I have double siphon on just because I was running this and I didn't really care about anything else. I find Finalities is pretty good at its ammo economy because it lasts so long and can kill so many enemies during that time. So I just have a special ammo finder on. Then I've got some resist on the chest, extra stasis damage on here for the sniper, and a scavenger for the sniper because I am going to pump that thing out to kill champions and other enemies in a lot of content. And then a little bit of a proximity ward here for finishers, time dilation, the usual suspects here for mods. Once again, artifact is not terribly important. So go ahead and take this build and take it out into some content and see how it does. Our final build here is going to be Behemoth Titan. Behemoth Titan, I think, is super, super fun. I love Shiver Strike. This is one of my favorite abilities to melee with because I find the charge very fun, very high control on the mobility, and it just feels good to punch something and watch it fly off into the distance. Is it the best melee in the game? No, not really, but fun all around. If this was a Icefall Mantle build, this would be a little bit different, but I'm going with a super spammy build because I like Glacial Quake. Really cool super, very high damage in the right situations. The Lost Sector I brought us into, pretty bad there because there's a lot of enemies that fly, especially at the end, but in content where the enemies are grounded, Glacial Quake is a disgustingly strong ability. Howl of the Storm was recently buffed as well, so I kind of wanted to go in and dig into that. So this build is actually going to be a Peacekeeper's build with Howl of the Storm. Very strange mix, but trust me, plenty of fun. Howl of the Storm, recently buffed, is a slide melee. It now gives you a second melee charge, which is super cool. And then while you're sliding, doing an uppercut attack with your melee keybind, we'll go ahead and launch out 2 waves of crystals that will then freeze enemies instantly. These crystals can then be shattered for damage, and with Tectonic Harvest to go ahead and give you Stasis Shards. Now, the base functionality of Stasis Shards is that when you pick them up, they give you melee energy back. So at base, this feeds into itself somewhat, but with one of our fragments, Whisper of Hunger, that's going to greatly increase the amount of energy they give. So this will be self-sustaining with a little bit more melee stat. I actually have a very low melee stat for this because I didn't want to go dive through and find the armor. But if you get your melee stat to closer to 70 to 100, Howl of the Swarm is immediately self-sufficient and will feed back into itself 100% of the time. That alone, very, very powerful for letting you stun groups of enemies on command. Again, Glacier Grenade, letting me shatter more crystals to get some more shards here, keeping more frost armor up, obviously very, very strong. With the new way this works, shattering enemies will also give you a shard. So there is an argument now on Titan to use something like Duskfield or Cold Snap to more aggressively freeze enemies and generate shards. But Glacier Grenade, I just find, is very on demand, very low commitment for a decent enough reward. Barricade is your choice. I like Rally Barricade because of the reload speed bonus. And then obviously Glacial Quake is your only option for super. For the rest of the fragments after the Whisper of Hunger, which we talked about, Whisper of Shards is here. Titan is fully committed to shattering crystals, especially with Howl of the Storm equipped. So double dipping on the Hunger and Shards feedback here, where destroying the crystals on the Glacier Grenade and Howl of the Storm both give you melee energy through the shards they create and Hunger, as well as grenade energy through something like Whisper of Shards, which is like a 300 to 400% increase on your grenade regen. It's actually, I think, 500%. It's a 6x increase. So huge, huge gains here in your grenade energy and your melee energy. Again, if you're going to do this like fully committed and you didn't want to spare points for the weapon stat to do more weapon damage, I would put those points into your melee and your grenade to make sure they are 100-100. Rending is on here because this is a primary based build to go ahead and recharge our Glacial Quake. So just letting you shatter enemies and crystals much more quickly will save you a lot of time in the long run and make it more fluid. Obviously, Conduction is here as well, just to make sure you are getting all your crystals. For the weapon setup, this is probably the most thrown together thing here, because all I knew is I wanted to run the Fast Talker. I'm taking Target Lock with Cooling Baubles. Cooling Baubles will cool down your heat every time you get a Stasis Shard, which is going to be constantly with this build. And Target Lock will rapidly increase the damage of the SMG, stacking with Peacekeepers as our exotic armor here, where every hit will increase your SMG damage. This gets you up to, I think, like 250, 260% bonus damage, maybe even higher, depending on the enemy and the weapon stat and yada yada. That generates very, very quickly more and more super energy. You'll see in some of the clips, if you mag dump a champion with this combo, you will gen your super incredibly quickly. For other purposes, I do have Icebreaker on here. I find it is a very fun exotic to run in stasis builds, as killing enemies who are just sitting around with other weapons or abilities will give you Icebreaker ammo, and then shattering targets or getting a headshot kill with Icebreaker will cause an ignition. Or if you get a body shot kill, it will do a regular explosion like Firefly. For the most part, shattering enemies with Icebreaker is a great way to add a ton more AoE and add clear into a build. So this gives you a ton of ignitions on shattering enemies, ton of ammo with low commitment as long as you're getting kills. If you do the Catalyst, I'm lazy, I haven't gone and done the Catalyst. You will get one shot back every time you shoot an enemy affected by Stasis on a short cooldown. And then if you do multiple hits, you will get them back every like 2 or 3 shots. So great from all Stasis builds. I think almost all the builds I've shown today would appreciate using Icebreaker to some degree, but I just chose to have it on this guy, and every other build had the weapons they had. Then I had a Heavy Sniper on here for the shield breaking, the anti-barrier, just a little burst damage in case I had to kill something. Overall, a good weapon set. Not fully committing into using these and spamming these because I have under 100 weapon stat. But almost anything you take here will be fine and functional because it's mostly about Howl of the Storm and spamming the primary and hitting your super as often as you can. For the mods, I have a little bit of a super stat here because I wanted to get most out of my super damage. I've got a bit of melee fonts here so that when I have orbs, I am maximizing my grenade returns. Then we've got tons of resist on just because you're going to be going in for a lot of close range action. Double surges, probably not ideal. These, I don't even know if I checked the surges before I ran what I was running because I don't remember. I don't even have an arc weapon on. But normally this would be a surge and a scavenger, double surge for the primary to get more super energy. Your general best pick here. Time dilation is the only requirement as well. I have outreach to get us a little bit of green energy back when we need it. And Reaper, just to give us a nice way to make sure we're making orbs consistently. I like to have Reaper on this build because, like I said, Stasis is pretty bad at genning orbs. That's it for all the builds for today. Those are my 3 current favorite Stasis builds. I guess I'll leave some in the loadouts because people like dim loadouts. Not going to include the weapons in them, but at least the subclass setup will be in there for you, so you can go ahead and give that a try. Let me know what you guys think of these builds. If you guys are enjoying Stasis this time of year, now we're freezing our butts off over in Florida even. But, much worse up north. I hear you guys are having a pretty big storm, so I hope you're all doing well up there. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I will see you all again very, very soon.